Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Add Real-Time Critical Mainframe Events to Your SIEM. Here at SDS, we've been proudly providing quality mainframe solutions since 1982. We have a great reputation within the industry and are continuing to grow. We have hundreds of satisfied customers worldwide, many Global 500 companies, and large government organizations. And we're also recognized for our mainframe security tools, our VitalSigns network management solutions, and SDS eBusiness Server, our multi-platform encryption solution. And here's a little plug for our future events. January 16th, we're going to be doing the 5th edition of our Peeling the Onion tutorial. This looks at all of the available options for you to transfer files and the security faults and benefits from each one of them. Each section will include a quick 2 to 3 minute demo of the solution in action. And at the end of February, we are going to try to end some of the compliance confusion that everyone seems to be dealing with these days. Hopefully you can join us for one or both of these future webinars. Registration should be up on the website at least 1 month in advance of both of these share webcasts. And our presenters today are, first, we have Jack Laury, who's a sales rep here at SDS. He has a long and established history of dealing with mainframe security solutions for companies just like SDS. He will present why real-time monitoring of ZOS security events is so important. And he'll be followed by Colin Vandross, our senior systems engineer here at SDS, and he will attempt to close the ZOS mainframe security gap. Without further ado, here's Jack Laury. Jack, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Jed. I appreciate it. Welcome to everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Jack Laury, and I'm on the sales team here at SDS. Just a little backgrounder, for over 20 years, I've had the opportunity to work with Fortune-class organizations and government entities like yours in addressing IT and business challenges with software automation solutions. And that includes security products such as enterprise SIEMs or security information and event management tools. So to set the stage for the next couple minutes, I'd like to touch on some key factors that highlight the criticality of including the mainframe in your defense in depth strategy. So enterprise SIEMs such as ArcSight, QRadar, Splunk, and others are required monitoring tools in today's enterprise. They're not just a nice to have like they used to be. They provide a central repository for all of the logs from every system, device, and application in your enterprise, and then use sophisticated correlation engines and machine learning to look for and alert on anomalies or anomalous behavior that may require action to be taken. This bad behavior could originate anywhere in the environment, and that includes the mainframe, but we find that the mainframe has more often than not been excluded from this quote-unquote enterprise strategy. So for those on the call from the InfoSec team, you've seen these stats dozens of times, and I don't mean to exclude the mainframe folks, because you've probably seen them as well. But the scary part is that the costs and the days to identify a breach do not seem to be going down. It highlights the creativity and the perseverance of hackers who are constantly looking for new ways to get in the door. It thus requires a true multi-tool defense in depth strategy to address specific gaps. So needless to say, those organizations that have and continue to deploy automated solutions to harden their environment, such as including real-time mainframe log forwarding into their SIEM strategy, will reduce their risk of breaches, will reduce their mean time to resolution, and if a breach does occur, will reduce the cost of that breach. So there are a number of factors affecting the total cost of any breach, with some of them obvious, like the size of the breach and how long it takes to first identify it, and secondly, to contain it. But all of these speak broadly to the topic at hand in today's webinar. You need an effective means of detecting a potential breach as soon as possible, as well as the ability to get to the root cause as soon as possible so you can lessen the effect of that breach. This leads to a key point of our session: why include the mainframe in your real-time SIEM strategy? So yes, the mainframe is still the most secureable platform in the enterprise, but you must dispel the myth that it is not vulnerable, because it is, in fact, vulnerable, particularly due to business-driven modernization initiatives that have exposed it to other systems and to the internet. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, the mainframe is typically the system of record housing well over 50% and often over 70% of an organization's revenue-driven transactions and PII, or personally identifiable information. So even if your mainframe is in a state of evolution where apps are being rationalized and migrated to other platforms, and the mainframe itself has taken on a different role, or for that matter, may even be decommissioned over time, hackers certainly don't care about that. As long as it's an operational system that they can gain access to, it's on their target list. And the impact of a mainframe breach can be exponentially more damaging given the data that resides on it. One last but very important point. For the same reason you forward the logs from all of your distributed systems to your enterprise SIEM in real time, and that is for comprehensive event correlation and faster response to real risks, you also need to forward your z/OS mainframe logs in real time to your SIEM. You just can't say it too much. Time is of the essence in breach response. So you might think that hardening your defenses and overall security posture should be the main driver for incorporating mainframe logs into your SIEM. But we find that regulatory compliance is often the impetus for implementing an automated log forwarding solution. You know, for perhaps you failed an audit, or the time it takes to prepare for one is far too time consuming. While many organizations have taken steps to save specific mainframe logs in a special file on the mainframe, or have consolidated them into a file that is pulled down by the enterprise SIEM on some sort of batch schedule to meet basic compliance requirements, this is still a manual process. It's prone to error, and more often than not, it's simply providing a storage area for thousands or millions of logs to be reviewed manually by a very limited resource team. From our experience, those logs are not in the required format to be incorporated into the SIEM's correlation process, as many SIEMs like ArcSight and QRadar have proprietary formatting requirements. The correlation process and the correlation engine in these SIEMs is the real value of an enterprise SIEM, looking for events or anomalies that could be an evolving threat originating from any system across the enterprise that needs to be evaluated. So here's the bottom line. Identifying vulnerabilities and attacks that originate in any and all systems in your enterprise as soon as possible is a requirement, not a nice to have, thus the expansive growth of the SIEM market. Incorporating your mainframe logs into your enterprise SIEM strategy in real time, number one, closes the gap that exists in many enterprises today, and presumably in your enterprise, which is why you're attending today's session, while maximizing the investment you've made in your enterprise SIEM. Number two, helps minimize the chance for and the effect of a breach. And number three is a compliance necessity for PCI, IRS 1075, GDPR, and other regulations. Infrastructure tools like our SDS VitalSigns SIEM agent for z/OS help you shore up your defense in-depth strategy and your ability to meet ever-changing compliance requirements. So that's it for me. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll pass this back to Jed. Jed, it's all yours.
Well, thanks, Jack. That was great. Great presentation. And now, Colin Vandross. Colin, go ahead.
Thank you, Jed, and thank you, Jack. So here is the agenda for my piece of the presentation today. I'd like to go over what some of the customers are doing when it comes to bridging this mainframe security gap. Then also items to take into consideration if you do go down this path. Some questions to ask yourself about what is the right methodology, what is the right approach to take with this, and also what events are important for you and your company to make sure that if the unfortunate thing does happen where you are compromised, you are going to have the necessary information that is being sent from the mainframe to your SIEM, and you're going to be able to backtrack and see, exactly what transpired during that period of time. Then a little overview of the VitalSIM agent architecture, and also a short overview of some of the features of the product. and then I'm going to be doing a live demonstration for you. And this is what we've learned from our some of our discussions with customers. Actually, I was recently on site at a customer, and their approach was to dump the SMF records on an hourly basis. They would then take that information and send it off to their SIM. I've seen it on some occasions where customers go for sending it only once a day. So at night, when all of the SMF events have occurred at a certain time, they will then dump the SMF information to or send it off to their SIM. That certainly might not be the most proactive way of doing things, especially if there's an event that is really important and you need to take immediate action on that event. This might not be the most elegant way or the best way for you to monitor these events. I certainly got the impression from my recent on-site that that customer was just sending events to their SIM and nobody was taking further steps, on the data that was being sent to their enterprise SIM. Certainly, if something does happen, the SIM is a very powerful box. You can trap events, you can escalate them, you can certainly look for certain strings within data on the SIM, and if an event does occur, you can escalate that immediately to the relevant parties that need to go or need to follow up on that particular item. So maybe that's not the most proactive way of monitoring some of your events. Then I've seen some folks go the SAF reports route. That certainly works, where you can generate these reports to find out what folks are doing. It also depends on the frequency of the reports. Again, it may not be in real time, but it certainly can also identify what folks are doing on your mainframe. Then some folks are using the IDS. I know the bank I worked at, they had a different approach with regard to the IDS and where it should be positioned. They thought that positioning on the mainframe wasn't the correct place. They had it on the perimeter of the network, where events, they were captured way before they even entered the bank's network back then. There are specialized platforms designed to perform network IDS, and sometimes I don't think it makes sense to use ZOS in such a role, but it all depends on your organization and what their mandates and goals are. Then also, a lot of folks are taking a more serious look at SIM. SIM has been around for such a long time. For some reason, the mainframe has been excluded from it, but now there are ways of getting the SMF data from the mainframe, from LPARs into your SIM. And I think the big thing to stress here is with the VSA solution, it is certainly in real time. So items to take into consideration if this is something that you want to look at. Certainly there's different approaches, but the question you should be asking, what should you be monitoring? Certainly not something that you should be doing in isolation, so it shouldn't be relied on the systems programmer or the security expert to decide what events is important to them. You would want to gather your team around all the different disciplines, and you probably heard of the term separation of duties. I've also heard of it called the segregation of duties. But sit down as a team and decide what events are important to you. I had one customer that had this was a checkbox item for him. They had an audit there. They were lacking in this particular area. He chose to implement our solution, and he turned on all of the events and sent all of them to his enterprise SIM. So maybe probably not the best way to do things, but it was something that he needed to do. He had some other priorities, so he turned on the events, and I'm guessing some filtering will take place later on down the line. We do have a very good baseline that we ship the product with, something that you can consider using. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but certainly I think it is a really good starting point. So from the get-go, you have some events that's going to be reported to your SIM. You can certainly build on this or take off as you deem fit, but it's a good baseline. And in fact, we have some records that I'll share with you from a SMF80 type point of view. So this is events that or information that we've learned from our customers, what they thought was really important to monitor from an SMF80 point of view. Careful, some of those records can be pretty overwhelming. One that you need to look out for is going to be the SMF92s. They can be pretty, there's a lot of information. So perhaps if you do want to enable some of those 92 records, only enable a subtype of them. And then just to share some information with you, this is something that we can pass on to you, disseminate to the audience today. But if you want to get some more information, and this is, like I said to you, what we've learned from our customers, they thought that all the ones highlighted in red were really important, and that should be monitored on the product, whereas the ones highlighted in yellow were not as important, and they thought that these are the ones that they should be turned on and monitored from a RACF point of view. And as you can see, there's a bunch of these RACF commands, some really powerful ones, but we can certainly share this information with you. So some items to take into consideration if you do going down this path and you want to bridge this gap, this security gap, what SMF records are important to you. We monitor a whole slew of SMF records, but you will have to determine which are the ones that you want to turn on. What files are important to you? Is sys1.palmlab one of them? I know that would be one that would be a good candidate for you to monitor. So VSA will be able to monitor all the updates, any activity that occurred on the sys1.palmlab PDS. There might be some other important ones that you want to include, and I'll show you that in my live demo, how you can add these PDSs or the data sets to the VSA configuration ISPF panel, and you then can monitor some of this very important data sets. How about those really important TSO user IDs? The bank I used to work at had a methodology when I used to go in on a change control or a maintenance slot, and you want to implement your changes. Our TSO user IDs that we used did not have the relevant access, so we would have to implement some change control procedure to get these really powerful TSO user IDs that would allow us to implement our changes. But those TSO user IDs were pretty powerful. You had access to almost everything on the mainframe or on that LPAR. That would probably have been a really good candidate to monitor and see exactly what changes were made during that particular time when these changes were implemented in our maintenance slot. Do you want to be made aware of when TSO user IDs are logging outside of your normal hours? Perhaps user ID or TSO user ID logging at 2 o'clock in the morning is not normal operation for you, and you want to be made aware of that. So that's certainly something that the SIEM can escalate for you. Or how about some of those important right to operator console messages? The ICH 408I message springs to mind. That's one that would tell you when a RACF violation occurs. Perhaps you want to monitor some the SMF 119 records. Perhaps when a file gets stored or the file is retrieved from the mainframe, those do kick out right to operator console messages. You can put this in the product so that you have some idea. But then again, the SMF 19 record 119 might just be the one that you're interested in. The APF changes, I know this is something that auditors want to keep tabs of. In fact, since ZOS 2.1, SMF 90, a new SMF 90 record has been added. So you can keep tabs on when APF changes were made, whether there were additions or files that were removed from the APF list. RACF commands, pretty straightforward. The setup command, you'll see that in my live demo. Some of the commands I just shared with you on the spreadsheet, those would be the ones that you want to add to the monitoring to make sure that you got a full scope or you got full visibility as to what the security administrators are performing on a day-to-day basis. How about the starter tasks when they end and fired up? So you can get information on those, and I'll illustrate that in our live demo. The FTP transfers, which I mentioned, the SMF 119s, perhaps you want to go back, a year or two to figure out what a file was, stored on the mainframe. You can go back and see the user ID, the date and time, what files were retrieved from the mainframe. So that could be something that you want to take into consideration if you're going down this path and want to add this information into the configuration of the product and sending off to your enterprise SIEM. USS activity, there's a lot of products these days that exploit USS. There's a few powerful commands. I've used a few of them. The change ownership command and the change mod command are two that spring to mind. Perhaps you want to monitor those. Certainly turn on those so you can get visibility. But remember, this is the one that I would advise using. Don't just open up the floodgates because it can be pretty chatty. And this is the SMF 92. It generates a lot of records and a lot of activity. DB2 activity, so we can provide activity on that. If you're a DB2 shop and you want to know, what people are doing, the SMF 100 and 102 records, and the IFCIDs or the IFSIDs, as sometimes people refer to it, we can provide you some good information on that. So the product does support DB2. That is an additional component on the product. And then syslog-D activity. Do you want to know what is occurring from a syslog-D point of view? So all things, items to take into consideration, and certainly you have to work with your team to figure out what is the best way, what's the right information that you want to monitor, and make sure that you're covering the full spectrum, because the last thing you want to do is leave out something, and that turns out to be where you're lacking, and you need to go back and find out this information at a later stage. So here's the architecture of the VSA product. Runs on the mainframe on ZOS, runs as a starter task, and we gather information from, so these are the data sources from ZOS SMF records in real time. We can send this event in real time to your SIM. Then we also can harvest the right to operator messages, or right to operator console messages, and also DB2 is where we gather information from. We require the IFU 83 and 84 and 85. In fact, 83 and 84 exits, they need to be available, so you need to make sure those are turned on, and that's where we gather the information from. In fact, when the starter task comes up, we'll tell you which ones we've connected to and which ones we are monitoring on. Then the right to operator console messages, those ICH 408I messages, or any messages that you deem important. Right now, we gather that through the subsystem and forward that off to your enterprise SIM. There is some changes going to take place. We have this on our roadmap. We're probably going to make this a little bit easier and go for a MCS or EMCS console, and gather or capture those right to operator console messages through that mechanism. That's on our roadmap. Then also the SMF 100 and 102 messages is something that we gather from a DB2 point of view. So in VSA, you have a ISPF panel that you can use to configure what messages, what files you want monitored. And then also in the configuration of the actual product, you can turn on what SMF events you want enabled. So if you want the VSAM updates, the TCP/IP, FTP 119s, the SMF 80s, the SMF, boy, there's a whole bunch of them, SMF 42s, 30s, 17s, 18s, 62s. Those are all ones that you can turn on, but that all goes back to what you want to monitor and what we just spoke about, some of the questions you need to ask yourself. Also, if you're a site that uses more than one SAF product, so whether it's RACF, ACF2, and Top Secret, we don't care. We do support any one of these. If you're one cake running RACF and the other is running Top Secret, all you have to do is configure the agent to use whatever the local SAF product is that it's running. So we do support all three of those. And we also have some fine examples on all three of those. Then the APFs I mentioned, and also USS activity. All of this information is forwarded from the SIM agent on the mainframe to your enterprise SIM. So it could be QRadar, Splunk, ArcSight. We're agnostic. We send to any one of those in the correct format. We can deliver the messages using TCP, and that can be encrypted using ATTLS. So obviously there's really sensitive information that is being sent from the mainframe agent across to the enterprise SIM. So that's something that you may want to turn on. We also do have a mechanism if for some reason that we're trying to deliver these secure TCP, using TCP. Obviously TCP is connection oriented. We guarantee the delivery of these messages to your enterprise SIM, but let's assume for some reason that the enterprise SIM is not available and we're unable to deliver the messages. We will kick out a message to let you know that we're unable to deliver those messages to the enterprise SIM. That'll give you time to go and follow up with your SIM guys to find out if there's any outage on that area or on that box. Once they got it up, we will then send all of those all those secure messages, or all those messages that is destined for the QRadar, and we will deliver them. They'll be buffered up in the starter task or in the address space, and we will send them off. Obviously, there are some constraints as to how long we will keep those messages in the starter task. If you have a site that is running more than one enterprise SIM, so you have maybe two of them, maybe one for standby or one for backup. If you're using UDP, you can deliver to multiple sites. You just configure the IP address. So you can deliver them using TCP, securely using ATLS, or you can use UDP if that is your preference. Then to wrap it up, how this all fits into the big picture, so integrating your mainframe into your network security, we always ask folks, if you have an enterprise SIM, why is the mainframe excluded from it? Why not just include it? So here we've got agents running on all of these LPARs, and they're sending events to the enterprise SIM. The firewall guys and the router guys have been exploiting this for years. So those events are also being sent to your enterprise SIM and also Windows and Unix. I was at a conference recently. The presenter was talking about the opportunity a customer had where they were monitoring events. Some piece of this particular application resided on the mainframe and another piece resided on the Windows application. They were sending all of these events from both of these origins to the SIM, and they were able to piece all of that all together when they were tracking some sort of violation that they were looking into. Okay, short overview of VSA, some of the features. We have a TSO rule generator. I'll be showing you that in the live demo. So that's how you can add filters, message IDs, and user IDs to the product to monitor. Then for those customers that have, maybe a large amount of rules that they want to add to the product, you can use the batch rule generator. So that's a batch job that implements these rules into these VSAM files. Something very interesting that a lot of customers like about the product is if you have some events that are archived, so perhaps you do not have this visibility right now and you intend to run an agent on one of your LPARs, that archive SMF information, you can take them and feed them through the batch feed of the product, send them off to your SIM, and you can get visibility on those records from a year or 2 or 3 years ago. So that's certainly something that some of our customers like. Alerts are delivered from the mainframe agent using UDP, TCP to the SIM or to IDS. So something that we spoke about. So how does it work? It runs as a starter task on all of the LPARs that you want security events reported on. If you have 10 LPARs and you elect to run an agent on every one of those, you'd need 10 of those, one agent per LPAR. We use the industry standard UDP and also TCP to deliver the messages to the SIM. We can send to multiple destinations if that's a requirement. We can also write to DASD and exploit user SMF records. So if you have some of those products that are using user SMF records, we can certainly do that. And as I mentioned, agnostic, we can deliver to any one of the SIMs on the market. Supported log types, Leaf, you've heard of that. That's the one that QRadar uses, log event extended format. We are certified Leaf, so the format that we send the data from our agent to the SIM is in the format that complies with the IBM standard. So the event, there you can see it standards with the IBM QRadar Leaf format. So you will be guaranteed that the data is coming in the right direction, or getting it in the right format, shall I say. Then there's also the SAFE format, common event format, where also complies with the requirements of HIPAA ArcSight and common event format. Again, we will send the data, and when it gets to the other side, HIPAA ArcSight will be able to understand and interpret that data. Okay, so let's get to the live demonstration. I'm going to switch to one of my TSO sessions, and I'm going to illustrate to you how you can add some of these rules. So let's execute this. This is the ISPF interface. Remember, I told you they can also use a batch interface. So let's add a filter, and in this particular case, I want to add a filter and say I want to know anytime there's any updates to sys1.palmlab. For the most part, we would recommend leaving these base values to what we've set them, the number of exceptions and also the time limits. These are pretty good working starting values. If you want to be a bit more aggressive, you can certainly tweak them. And they also are documented how these operands work. So let's hit the F4 button. That'll add that particular record, sys1.palmlab. Let's add another one, and let's go with this particular and say let's monitor any message that begins with 408i, and then we can use wildcarding as well. So let's do the F4 and add that one. ICH 408i. And then let's go with one last one, and let's add my user ID. So, oops, that's not going to work. Let's go with use and go with BCVR0. That's my user ID. So I'm saying that the product must monitor any activity from user ID BCVR0. And I'll hit the F4 button, that'll add it, and there you can see them, sys1.palmlib, ICH408i, and you can see I've got a few others. Pretty easy to get rid of them or to make any changes. So for example, if I want to delete one of these, I can just go D there and that'll delete it for me. But there you can see some of the messages that I have in effect. So I'm ready to go. Let's bring up QRadar. I'm going to bring up QRadar here. I've got it running on one of my browsers. There's QRadar. This is the product that we're sending events to. In fact, I've chosen to configure my agent to send events to multiple destinations. So I'm also sending events to something called Kiwi Syslog Service Manager. And I will show you that when I do the live demo now and generate some of these events, you can see the difference. This is just coming in a syslog format. So let's close that off. I'm going to go back to my emulator, and let me just point out what the plan is here. I'm going to be logging on, creating events, different SMF events from my mainframe on the mainframe called 031. So there you can see the log source is 031. As I do this, you're going to see the events pop up on the left-hand side on QRadar. So let's kick it off. I'm going to log on generating a SMF type 80 event. And let's go with one called bad guy. And immediately there you can see it came up. The user ID specified is undefined. So truly real time. The events are generated almost immediately. So let's go with my user ID. Let's go with a bad password. And you'll be able to see immediately insufficient authority, invalid password specified. So let's log on. And now get the logon information about my user ID logon. Remember, I've specified to monitor everything that's occurring from BCVR0's point of view. So all activity about my user ID is going to be recorded. Let's go to 3.4 and let's go to sys1.palmlib. And I'm going to edit sys1.palmlib. Let's create a member called test. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there's some activity going on there. Let's save that off. There you can see the DFSM add replace. By the way, you'll see some of them saying unknown. So just for demo purposes, we've created something called a DSM. The folks that's on the call today that know a lot about SIEM will know about a DSM. But what we can do is we can send you a QID file. It's a text file that you can upload to your QRadar, which basically makes the customization of some of these events a lot easier. So that's the reason why you're seeing some of them unknown. Let's delete that, and you'll see there's the delete. Okay, so that's worked. We now proven, or we are monitoring all events from a sys1.palmlib point of view. Okay, I'm going to go back and let's go to RACF. Option 3 is RACF. Just generate a few of these. I don't have access to all of these setups command. There you can see immediately insufficient authority. So I'm just going to do one more. And let's close that off. Let's try generating a digital certificate. Again, I do not have access to this, but you'll see the messages are being generated and immediately popping up on QRadar. Okay, let's get out of RACF and let's go and have a look at the log just to show you some of those right to operator console messages. And I'm just gonna go back down here. There you can see user ID BCVR0. This Colin guy is somebody that we don't trust here, and he's generating a lot of these violations. So we need to look into what this guy was doing. So let me go back to TSO, and what I want to do is I'm going to conclude the presentation just to show you the configuration of the product and also some of the stats that it produces. I know some of the folks on the call today we can assist you from a performance and a pricing point of view. A lot of the enterprise SIMs, they are They bill you according to the amount of events that you are sending to the mainframe. So we can certainly help you with that. That's why maybe opening up the floodgates and just sending everything to the enterprise SIEM might not be the best way to go. So I'm going to show you the configuration. Just browse the configuration. There you can see we RACF and we're turning on, these are the events that we're looking for. Obviously, this is a vendor environment. We're showing it for illustration purposes, so it may not be what you want to do in your environment. We also got DB2 turned on, some of the audit classes. There you can see some of them with the SMF 102s. Monitoring USS events. So also, let me just see. Here I'm sending to Leaf, so that's the alert header that we're sending. That's the IP address and the name of the TCP IP started task, the subtask. Here I'm sending in a UDP format, and there you can see the 2 IP addresses that I'm sending to. Then also, this might be of interest to you. Let's assume you now testing and you're sending events from the mainframe to your enterprise or your SIEM, whatever the SIEM is on the other end, and your gentleman on the SIEM side is saying he's not seeing any events. Make this right to con operand turn it to yes, so that what will happen is then we will generate messages inside of the starter task in the address space, and anytime an SMF event or right to operator console message is generated, you will then see it in the starter task, and that'll give you a good idea as to the events of what events are being generated. So there you can see some of the events that we have go here. And then lastly, just to show you the stats file, here you can see some of the stats. And this is just going to give you, oops, that's the wrong one. This is going to give you a good idea as to what events are being delivered. There's SMF 15s, there's some of them, and this might help you from a performance and also a pricing point of view to see how many events are being sent from the mainframe to the enterprise SIEM. There's the 92s, that's the one I warned you about. Be careful about that one. And then we also have some security events that we can tell you. So here's the type 80s, 277 events was delivered. These were the TSO log-on, log-offs. There's some authority checks, define resources, set our ops commands. And this is some of the information that we can provide for you.
Thanks, Colin. And we've got a few questions from the audience, it looks like. First off, can VSA capture access to sensitive resources and every time a login is attempted or fails?
Thanks, Jed, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for your time. So the short answer is yes. Within the actual data event that's sent from the mainframe, so in the SMF event, the date, the time, the user ID, these are all critical information or important information that is recorded in the event. In fact, what I did here, just for illustration purposes on our test alpha, is I created a specific rule that records anytime my user ID logs on after a certain time, and also on a Saturday and a Sunday. Obviously, this is just for illustration purposes, but it's just to show you how people can track user IDs. I know people have those pretty powerful user IDs that they want to track anytime somebody logs on and logs off with those user IDs. So the short answer is yes, and there is a lot of valuable information inside of the SMF record.
Okay, great. And secondly, how is sensitive data protected while in transit or storage?
That's a good question, and I think this question stems from people's concerns because there is obviously valuable or important information being sent from the mainframe to the SIEM. So firstly, all data leaving the VSA SMF exits and the VSA subsystem interface is highly obfuscated until it arrives for processing within the ZOS agent's protected address space. So it cannot be seen by the naked eye or read or even found within a system core dump. So that's valuable or good information to know. From a transmission point of view, data is transferred from the agent to the enterprise SIEM over a TCP connection, and you can actually use TLS to encrypt the transmission of the data. So again, from the network portion, there's no prying eyes. All of that information is pretty secure, both within the VSA product and also from on the network side.
Okay, great. I think we have, we have time for one more question here. How long does it take to install and customize VSA on ZOS?
So again, a good question. This is Pretty much depending on the site. I would say maximum of an hour to an hour and a half. In fact, I was recently on site at a customer. I got to the customer's premises around about 9 o'clock in the morning. And within 2 hours, we had the product up and working and successfully delivering events from their mainframe, their test or their sandbox to QRadar. So typically it depends from site to site, but yeah, I would say for the most part, not more than 2 hours, and you should have the product up and running and also delivering events to your SIEM.
Okay, great. Well, that wraps it up. It looks like we have a few more questions, but we will be sure to get back to you, and Colin will write up an answer for you. Thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.